$20,000. That's the price range the first home humanoid robots are heading toward, less than a new car costs. While you sleep, the projection is that a machine in human shape folds the laundry, washes the dishes, tidies the kitchen, and has the house ready before you wake up. This isn't far future fiction. Companies have already opened pre-orders for home humanoids with delivery dates set, and one of the most conservative banks in the world projects that, a few decades from now, there will be more robots than cars, most of them inside people's homes. I won't tell you to buy one or which brand to pick. That's your call, and the technology is still early. I'll show you something deeper that almost nobody is looking at. Domestic labor is the biggest invisible economy on the planet. It's trillions of hours a year, the vast majority done for free, mostly by women, and it never enters any official account of wealth. When a machine starts doing that work, it's not just your kitchen that changes. It's the oldest structure of human life. Who takes care of the home, and at what cost? And history has already warned us what happens when a machine invades the household. Let's start with a fact that usually goes unnoticed, because it's been under our nose our whole lives. Domestic labor is, in sheer hours, the largest economic activity of humanity: cooking, cleaning, washing, caring for children and the elderly, organizing, shopping. Add all of it across every home in the world, and you reach a number of hours that surpasses any industry. But this work has a peculiar feature. It's mostly invisible. It isn't paid, so it doesn't appear in the gross domestic product, in a country's official account of wealth. It's as if it didn't exist economically, even though it's the base the entire rest of the economy rests on. After all, nobody goes out to work if there's no food, clean clothes, and cared for children at home. And there's a second fact, equally old. This work falls, historically, disproportionately on women. For centuries, the structure was this. Someone, almost always a woman, devoted a large part of her life to the invisible functioning of the home, so the rest of the family could do other things. Hold on to that, because it's the key to this episode. We're talking about freeing the largest reserve of human time there is, one that has always been unequally distributed. When a technology touches that base, it touches everything. And there has already been a technology like that. Look at what it did. In the 20th century, a wave of machines invaded the home and promised exactly this: the end of housework. The washing machine, the fridge, the vacuum, the gas stove. Each of them eliminated a brutal effort. Washing clothes by hand in a tub used to eat a whole day a week. And they did, in fact, free up an enormous amount of time, which helped make possible one of the greatest social transformations in history: women entering the workforce en masse. So far, the story is beautiful. But there's a twist that the historian Ruth Cowan uncovered and documented, and it's fascinating. Appliances didn't reduce the total time spent on the home as much as expected. Here's what happened. The standards rose alongside. When washing got easy, people washed clothes far more often. When cleaning got easy, the house had to be far cleaner. The work the machine saved, social expectation gave back as a higher demand. It's a pattern that repeats with technology. The tool cuts the effort of each task, but the bar rises, and the total time doesn't always fall. Hold on to that lesson, because it's the most important warning for what comes now. The humanoid robot can free up immense time. Or it can, if we're not careful, merely raise the standard of what counts as an acceptable home. But there is, however, a crucial difference between it and the washing machine. The washing machine did one thing: wash. The fridge, chill. Each appliance was a specialist in a single standardized task. And that's why, despite the whole revolution, most domestic labor stayed human, because the home is the realm of the non-standardized. Picking a toy off the floor, clearing the table, folding a wrinkled shirt a specific way, noticing the sink is clogged. improvising when something is out of place. These varied, messy, unpredictable tasks no specialized machine could do. They required hands, eyes, and general-purpose judgment. That's exactly where the humanoid robot changes the game. It isn't a specialist in one task. It's a general-purpose platform in human shape, precisely to operate in a world designed for humans: doorknobs, stairs, utensils, furniture. In theory, the same robot that washes the dishes can fold the laundry, then pick up the toys, then take out the trash. For the first time, the promise isn't to automate one chore, but the whole home. Careful, and here it's important not to overstate. Fine dexterity, picking up delicate things, dealing with the real chaos of a household is still very hard, and the first models will be limited and clumsy. It's projection, not magic. But the direction is clear, and it leads to an inevitable question. Wait, because it leads straight to it. Who gets this robot first? For almost all of history, having someone to take care of the home for you was a privilege of the few. The elite always had servants, butlers, cooks, nannies. A domestic service economy that freed the rich from the work of the home at the cost of the poorly paid work of others. The modern middle class in much of the world did this work themselves, with the help of appliances. The humanoid robot proposes something historically new: to give anyone, in theory, the equivalent of domestic staff, without that depending on exploiting another human being's labor. It's the possibility of democratizing a privilege that was always for the elite. But at first, it'll be the opposite of that. Like every expensive technology, the first robots go to those who can pay. And that creates, for a while, a new form of inequality. Rich families with free hours every day because the machine handles the home, and families that keep doing everything by hand. The big question, which is a projection and not a certainty, is how fast the price falls. The history of technologies like the mobile phone shows that things that start as an elite luxury can become a common item in a decade or two. If that happens with the home robot, the millennia-old privilege of not having to care for the home could, for the first time, reach almost everyone. And what you do with the free time is the next question. Suppose the promise holds, and the robot really gives back, on average, an hour or two a day to each adult in a home. It sounds small. It's enormous. Imagine. An hour a day is a whole lifetime of time across the years. The real question, then, isn't technical, it's human. What would you do with that time? And here the lesson of the washing machine returns as a warning. When appliances freed time, that time didn't automatically become creative leisure or rest. Much of it was absorbed by more work, more consumption, higher standards. There's no guarantee the robot's time will go to anything good. It can go to more screen hours, or be reabsorbed by a society that always finds a way to keep us busy. But it can, if you want it to and stay alert, go to what really matters and that the rush always steals: being present with your children, caring for your health, learning, creating, truly resting. Here, the nexialist lens appears. Technology delivers the possibility of free time, but it doesn't decide what you do with it. That decision is yours, and it's harder than it sounds, because we weren't trained to use the time that's left over well. And there's a place where this reclaimed time can have the most profound impact of all: care. There's a part of domestic labor that's different from all the others, and it's exactly the one growing fastest: the care of people. Remember the episode on the 100-year life? The world is aging fast, and the number of elderly who need daily care is soaring, while the number of younger people to care for them shrinks. It's a math that doesn't add up. There won't be enough human caregivers for such an aged population. This is where the home robot stops being a convenience and becomes, possibly, a social necessity. A humanoid that helps an elderly person stand, remembers the medication, carries weight, watches for a fall and calls for help, can let millions of people age with dignity in their own home instead of an institution. And I need to be very careful here, because it's delicate ground. Care isn't only physical task, it's also presence, affection, human connection, and that the machine doesn't replace, nor should it try. The real risk, which must be said, is using the robot as an excuse to abandon the elderly to a machine's company. The sensible projection isn't the robot replacing human warmth. It's the robot taking on the physical weight and the watching, freeing humans to do the part only a human does, which is to be there. Used well, it gives more care, not less. Used badly, it becomes automated loneliness. And this same tension appears even stronger with children. Now, the question that provokes the most visceral reaction. Would you leave a robot taking care of your children? For many people, the immediate answer is no. And that intuition deserves respect. Caring for children isn't just watching for safety. It's interaction, language, affection, example. It's what shapes a human being. There's a legitimate worry that outsourcing part of this to a machine could affect development in ways we don't even understand yet. There's no long-term study on children raised with the constant presence of a robot, simply because it has never happened in history. So any categorical claim either way would be invention. What can be honestly projected is a division similar to elder care. Families will likely accept the robot for physical and safety tasks, preparing a meal, watching that the child doesn't get hurt, organizing the room, and resist, rightly, handing it the effective and formative part. The intuition that a child needs human presence is deep and will probably hold the line on what matters. But there's an economic pressure pushing the opposite way. Exhausted parents with no support network may be tempted to delegate more and more. Where that line settles is one of the great open questions, and it won't be decided by technology, but by each family's values. And all these choices change what the home itself means. Think about what the home represents today in most people's minds. For many, it's partly an endless list of tasks. An unpaid second job that starts when the first one ends. The so-called second shift, which weighs especially on women, is exactly this: getting home from work to find another mountain of work waiting. If the home robot fulfills even part of the promise, it dissolves that second shift. And this is a deeper change than it seems, because it reconfigures the relationship between the people inside the home. Much of domestic conflict, of the silent resentments between couples, is born from the unequal and invisible division of household work: who washes, who cooks, who remembers everything. When the machine takes on the manual, repetitive part, that specific source of friction tends to shrink. The home can stop being a logistical battlefield and go back to being, in theory, what it should be: a place of rest and togetherness. I'm not painting a paradise. New tensions will arise over money, over trust in the machine, over what to do with the time. But the projection is that one of the oldest sources of strain in domestic life, the division of invisible work, loses force. And freeing the home from work has an economic effect that goes beyond its four walls. Now the uncomfortable part, because every liberation has a cost on the other side. Millions of people in the world earn their living doing domestic work for others: cleaners, day workers, caregivers, nannies. It's a huge sector, and it's, again, predominantly female, and often among the most economically vulnerable. If the home robot becomes common and cheap, part of these jobs tends to disappear, and it would be dishonest to paint that transition as painless. Studies from institutions that track automation project that robotics and artificial intelligence could displace hundreds of millions of jobs worldwide in the next decade. And domestic work is on the front line, because it's exactly the kind of repetitive physical task the humanoid targets. At the same time, and this is also an honest part of the account, new roles are born: building, maintaining, repairing, programming, and supervising this giant fleet of robots. Robotics itself should create millions of jobs. The problem, as we saw in other episodes, is rarely the total quantity of work. It's the transition. The people who lose their livelihood on one end aren't always the ones who get the new openings on the other, and the mismatch can last years. The political and moral question, then, isn't whether it's worth freeing billions of hours of domestic labor. It is. It's how to care for those who lived off that work while the transition happens. And these forces don't come alone. There's an aspect of this future that chills you when you stop to think. A home robot is, by definition, a machine full of cameras, microphones, and sensors, walking through the most intimate place of your life, 24 hours a day. It sees everything: what you eat, how you sleep, who you argue with, what you keep in the cabinets. It's the most powerful surveillance device that ever entered a home, and we're thinking of inviting it to live inside one. This raises serious questions that need to be asked before, not after. Where does that data go? Who has access to what the robot sees and hears? Can the company that built it use the intimacy of your home to sell things? Or worse, what if it's hacked by a third party? The recent history of connected devices doesn't inspire total confidence. Many people already have gadgets at home that listen more than they should. With a robot that moves and sees, the risk goes up a level. The sensible projection isn't to refuse the technology out of fear, but to demand, from the start, clear rules. That the data stays with you, that processing happens on the device itself whenever possible, that there's transparency about what's recorded. The convenience of having the home cared for can't cost your privacy, and whoever understands this early will choose better. Now combine all of this with the other forces of this cycle. Now let the Nexulus lens join the pieces, because the home robot doesn't arrive in isolation. In the earlier episodes, we saw artificial intelligence become the brain, able to understand, plan, and decide. The humanoid robot is the body that brain was missing. Without a body, I only acted in the digital world. With a general purpose body, it begins to act in the physical world. And the first place that body arrives isn't the distant factory, it's your kitchen. Add the 100-year life to this, and the fit becomes clear. A population that lives much longer, that needs care for decades, meets exactly the technology capable of providing that physical care at scale. The three forces hold each other up. The artificial intelligence brain guides the robotic body, which cares for a humanity that lives ever longer. It's no coincidence they're arriving together. They're pieces of the same puzzle. And when you see the full picture, you realize the home, that space that seemed the most private and unchanging corner of life, is precisely where the great technological transformation will hit closest to the skin. The future won't arrive first in a distant lab. It'll arrive at dishwashing time. And if that's true, it changes how you should think about your own home from now on. Before we land, a danger almost nobody mentions, and that goes beyond jobs and privacy. The risk of a generation forgetting how to take care of itself. Cooking, cleaning, fixing, organizing. These aren't just boring chores. They're basic competences of autonomy, of knowing how to get by in the world. There's something deep in knowing how to prepare your own food, in caring for your own space. If the robot does everything, there's a risk that people, especially those who grow up with it, never learn these skills and become dependent on a machine for vital functions of life. It's the same trap we saw with technology in general. Every convenience we outsource can atrophy a capacity of ours. A person who never cooked, never cleaned, never cared for anything, is a more fragile, more dependent person, even living in a spotless home. The sensible projection, again, isn't to refuse the robot, but to use it consciously. Let it take the weight of repetitive work, but keep alive, by choice, the contact with the basic competences of life. Cook because you want to, not because you're forced to. Care for your space as a way of caring for yourself, not as a chore. Autonomy, in a world of machines that do everything, becomes a conscious choice, no longer a necessity. And that brings us to what to do in practice. So, in practice, what to do with all this? And I repeat that it's reasoning, not purchase or investment advice for your case. But a few attitudes make sense, starting today, even before any robot enters your home. First, start thinking of household time as a resource, not a destiny. Ask yourself, honestly, how many hours a week your home consumes of you, and what you do with them if you got them back. Being clear about this is the first step to not wasting the time when it returns. Second, in your family, talk now about the boundaries. What you delegate to a machine and what you insist on keeping human, especially in the care of children and the elderly. Deciding the values before the technology arrives keeps you from being pushed by convenience. Third, preserve by choice the basic competences of life in yourself and in those you raise. Knowing how to care for yourself won't stop being important just because a machine can do it for you. And fourth, when these devices arrive, demand privacy. Treat your home's data as the intimate asset it is. The home robot promises to give humanity back an ancient treasure, the time stolen by invisible work. But what you do with that treasure, and at what cost you accept it, depends on choices that start now, in your head, before they start in your kitchen. Now let me argue honestly against my own enthusiasm, because the home is exactly where robotics stumbles most. First, the home is the hardest environment there is for a robot. The factory is organized, predictable, repetitive. That's why robots already dominate there. The home is the opposite. Chaotic, full of different objects, stairs, pets, running children, spilled liquids. The fine dexterity of human hands, able to pick up a glass without breaking it and a fruit without bruising it, is absurdly hard to replicate. And decades of robotic promises have already let down anyone who bet on imminent arrival. Second, the price. Talking about $20,000 is an optimistic projection. The first models may cost much more and take years to truly fall. Third, trust. Even if it works and gets cheap, letting a heavy, autonomous machine move near children and the elderly demands near-perfect safety, and that takes time to prove. I take all of this seriously, but notice the asymmetry that matters. Even in the slow version, where the home robot only really arrives 10 or 15 years from now, the direction is unmistakable, and whoever thinks about the implications now will navigate the transition better. You don't need the robot to arrive tomorrow for it to be worth understanding what it means. By the end, the intelligent stance isn't to believe the hype or dismiss it, but to prepare for both speeds. So let me reveal what all of this really means, with no hype and no alarm. It's a projection, not a prophecy. Throughout the history of humanity, someone always had to care for the home, and that someone almost always paid a high and invisible price for it. Usually a woman, usually without recognition, usually sacrificing her own time and her own ambitions. The home robot points to the possible end of that millennia-old structure. Not the end of the home, nor of care, nor of the household as a place of affection, but the end of the obligation to spend a huge slice of life on the manual work of keeping it running. This can be one of the greatest liberations in history, especially for women, who always carried this weight disproportionately. Or it can, if badly handled, become more inequality, more surveillance, and more dependence. Both versions use exactly the same technology. The difference isn't in the robot, it's in the choices we'll make about access, about privacy, about what we keep human. The home was, for millennia, the place where the future took longest to arrive. It's about to become the place where it arrives first. And the question that remains isn't whether the machine will wash your dishes, it's what you'll do with the life you get back. And nobody will answer that for you. That's why this channel exists. Let's land, because projection without action is just anxiety with a pretty chart. And I'll stress it one last time. Nothing here is purchase or investment advice for your case. It's a map for you to think with. If this reading makes sense, 3 things are worth it starting today, long before any robot. First, see the invisible work of your home. Value it, divide it more fairly now, and notice how much of your life it consumes. Because whoever understands the size of the problem makes better use of the solution when it comes. Second, decide your values before the technology decides for you. What do you want to keep human, whatever the cost? That answer is yours, and it's better to have it ready. Third, prepare to use the time that will come back well, because, as the washing machine taught, free time doesn't automatically become a good life. That takes intention. The robot will take care of the home. The most beautiful and most difficult question is what you'll do with the hours the home always took from you. Those hours always existed. They were just occupied. Soon, perhaps, they come back into your hands. What you build with them depends on no machine. It depends on you having thought about it beforehand. You just thought about it. Now it's on you. Here on Nexialist Future, we don't recap the news. We project what it means for your life. If this map served you, subscribe and hit the bell. This is the 2nd episode of a cycle on the forces redrawing work and life. In the previous one, we saw artificial intelligence become the brain. Here, the robot become the body inside the home. Coming up next, the reversal of aging and the energy hunger of artificial intelligence. And tell me in the comments, which chore in your home would you hand to a robot today without thinking twice? Until next Thursday.